I'm Dr. Nemitz. I'm Medical Director at Affiliated Physicians, and I'm going to talk to you today about influenza. Not just seasonal flu, but also pandemic influenza, which can be much more dangerous. And I'm going to tell you what influenza is, how you get it, what it looks like, and I'll introduce you to a program that's available to protect you, your family, and your organization. Influenza is a respiratory virus, and you get it by breathing in the same air as an infected person who has exhaled the virus in microscopic droplet nuclei, 3 to 6 feet around an infected person who is coughing, sneezing, talking, or breathing. The influenza virus can be spread. When you have influenza, it hits you hard. There's often some confusion when people will say they had the flu when what they really had was a less serious, not influenza virus. Seasonal influenza, if you develop it, you will experience the abrupt onset of high fevers, shaking chills, terrible body aches, a cough that hurts your chest. You'll be laid up for a week. If you really have seasonal influenza, that's about as sick as you can get. Influenza is a virus of human beings, but it's also naturally present in animals, including birds. Avian flu refers to influenza viruses that are present in birds, and one specific strain of avian flu, the H5N1 virus, has been generating worldwide headlines. This virus is lethal in birds, and tens of millions of birds have been killed, mostly in Asia, by the H5N1 virus. The virus has also shown that it's capable of infecting human beings who come in direct contact with the infected birds. The mortality rate for people unfortunate enough to contract this virus from infected birds is extremely high, over 60%. Now, why are we concerned about this? The concern is that the H5N1 virus present in birds may change, may mutate into a form more like seasonal influenza, easily spread from person to person. This leads us to the concept of a flu pandemic. A new worldwide flu pandemic will occur when 3 criteria are met. Number 1, a new influenza virus emerges. That has already happened. Number 2, the virus is shown to be capable of infecting human beings, causing serious illness. And this has happened as well. The third criterion, which has not yet been met, is the virus changes to a form easily spread from person to person. When that third stage is reached, a new worldwide pandemic will be the result. Influenza pandemics are natural recurring events. There have been 10 documented worldwide flu pandemics in the last 300 years. And when a new worldwide pandemic develops, the influenza virus sweeps around the globe. Every person on the planet is vulnerable to being infected with a new influenza virus that is easily spread from person to person. In the 20th century, there were 3 separate worldwide flu pandemics. 1968 was the most recent pandemic. This was the so-called Hong Kong flu, and this was a relatively mild flu pandemic. In a normal seasonal flu year, 36,000 people died in the United States from influenza. Mostly, these are the elderly. It's common in nursing homes, but that's a normal year for seasonal flu deaths. In the 1968 Hong Kong flu, there were approximately 30,000 excess deaths in the United States. That counted as a very mild influenza pandemic. The one prior to 1968 was in 1957, the so-called Asian flu, also considered to be a very mild flu pandemic. There were approximately 70,000 excess deaths in the United States, though approximately 2 million people died from it worldwide. The one prior to 1957 was in 1918, and this was the so-called Spanish flu, and this was a worldwide catastrophe. 50 to 100 million people worldwide died from influenza. 550,000 people in the United States alone died from influenza. 13,000 in Philadelphia, mostly in a 5-week period around November 1918. The 1918 Spanish flu, which would now be called a Category 5 influenza pandemic by the Centers for Disease Control, shows us what the influenza virus is capable of doing. There are some disturbing similarities between the 1918 Spanish flu virus and the H5N1 virus that we're currently concerned about. Tissue samples have recently been recovered from people who died from the 1918 Spanish flu in Alaska. The virus has been genetically sequenced, and we now know more about the 1918 Spanish flu virus than we ever did before. It was an avian flu virus that made a direct leap from birds into humans, similar to the H5N1. Implications of a serious pandemic would be severe. In the 1918 flu pandemic, the United States experienced city quarantines, the required wearing of masks on the streets, severe shortages of nurses and healthcare workers. There were shortages of caskets, there were mass burials, there were widespread school and business closings, and widespread panic and fear. And unlike the seasonal influenza virus, which disproportionately affects the elderly, the 1918 influenza pandemic killed out of proportion to any other group people aged 20 to 29 years old in the prime of their life. The World Health Organization has 6 stages that describe an influenza pandemic. We're in stage 3 now. Stage 1 and stage 2 amount to more normal times. In stage 1, there is no new influenza virus present. In stage 2, there is a new influenza virus that is present, but it has not been shown to affect human beings. In stage 3, where we are now, there is a new influenza virus present. It has been shown to affect human beings, but it has not yet developed the capability of easy, sustained, person-to-person spread. By stage 4, everything has changed. At this stage, there has been a mutation in the influenza virus that allows it to be spread more easily from person to person. Stage 4 is localized human-to-human transmission. Stage 5 is more widespread but still localized human-to-human transmission. Stage 6 is a full-blown pandemic where there is widespread global transmission that is sustained throughout the human population. There are many computer models that describe what it's like when an influenza pandemic spreads. The one that I'm going to show you comes out of Los Alamos, and it postulates that 10 people arrive in Los Angeles on an airplane flight from Asia having been infected with a new pandemic influenza virus. On day 1, they arrive in Southern California. On day 50, a map of the United States looks like this, with a cluster of a large number of cases of influenza around Southern California, and scattered across the United States are pockets of smaller numbers of influenza cases. This is on day 50. On day 90, the map looks like this. High levels of influenza cases across the United States. 3 months after 10 people land in an airport, this is how quickly the virus spreads.